on behalf of the Society for Photographic Education, who is hosting this event, welcome. We are a member-based organization for those of you who aren't familiar with us, and I'll be dropping our website in the chat window a little bit later. A few protocol reminders. As an attendance taking mechanism, please do put your name and email address in the chat window so that we can share with you any updates directly in addition to social media posts. We've started you all out on mute so that the presenters can begin our meeting. We'll open the meeting up to the larger audience once they've completed their presentation, so please do stay on mute until then. You'll notice that we are recording and we do want you all to know that because we are posting these videos onto SPE's website and linking them via FotoFika's website, and wanted to make you aware before we got too far along. Once we wrap up our presentations, we'll ask that you can, or welcome you to stick around so that we can have an informal conversation. We'll ask that you present your questions also in the chat feature so that we can help facilitate the conversation, and I will remind you about that when we get to that part of the day. As we all are trying to establish the way to move forward in this shifting time, certainly the idea here is that we know we can do it together, so welcome, and we're thrilled to have you with us today. Betsy, on to you.
All right. Okay. So I have to admit that I've spent a lot of time, especially over maybe the last 12 hours, thinking through how to talk about and what to talk about today. And Anne and John and I have several ideas and thoughts. But I think one of the things that I've noticed is things are changing, moods are changing, amount of information out there is changing day to day, and it's good, it's bad, it's overwhelming, and trying to like negotiate. I mean, I have to say personally, trying to negotiate my own moods, and try to figure out how to be helpful. And Becky, who I will introduce in a minute, and I were talking today, and we were going back and forth between this idea of wanting to help and wanting to reach out and wanting to achieve and taking advantage of this moment, and then this idea of backing off and taking care of yourself. And so I think that some of the things I think are going to happen today is maybe not so much delivering suggestions or ideas, but being a place where we can, I mean, not just talk about feelings, but I feel like that there's a lot of emotional content to be dealing with right now, which brings it to what we want to focus on today, which is how to help the class of 2020 deal with the pretty significant challenges and disappointments of not having a BFA or an MFA show as they had planned. We have some ideas that we're going to talk about. I think one of the things is that we're hoping FotoFika can be a place of resources. There's several, Brian Ulrich is organizing something. I just saw that Strange Fire Collective is organizing something. We have, one of the thoughts that we had too is that there's this sense of urgency about a lot of things right now. And we think that Anne and John and I talked about thinking about time and knowing that, like, remembering that after these students graduate or whatever it is that's going to happen, or they stop going to school. I've spoken like a mom of kids in the class of 2020. I just have to say everything is informed by that. But, remembering back that when you leave school, how hard that year can be, and that this also is an opportunity. That's the theme here. This is an opportunity to think longer term and more imaginatively, maybe not more, about possibilities. And if we have time after Becky talks, John had a super exciting idea the other day. So we sometimes actually have a lot of fun kind of brainstorming and thinking of ideas, but we don't want to overwhelm. And I think that that's one of the things that Summer brought up last week, and I've been thinking about it all week, is how can we help and provide a place where things become less overwhelming. So yeah, so time was one of the things, like thinking through what needs to be done now for us, but also for our students, but also what we can do in the future, and you know, knowing that things are unfolding through time, but like looking forward to things as well, as abstract as they have to be. The other thought that we had, and this is a segue into introducing our guest today, was using your connections and you know, connecting with people and outside of, I mean, Becky, you're kind of you're in academia, but you're outside the like photo practice educator world. And so
you've muted.
Did I mute? Can you hear me?
Maybe it's me.
I've gotcha.
So I'm here.
Yep.
So the thought that we had was that we wanted to get some perspectives, and also maybe so that you could go back to your students and kind of encourage them again as this idea of the future, and that this isn't just about now, but this is about connections and hope. And so I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to introduce Becky Senf, who is the chief curator at the Center for Creative Photography. She's recently released a book on Ansel Adams that she worked on for 17 years. She's also a good friend, a really good friend and collaborator of mine, and I'm really grateful that she's willing to come talk. So Becky, I'm going to hand it over to you, but we might interrupt if, I don't know, maybe. The three of us do kind of sometimes interrupt. So are you there? You ready?
Okay. I'm ready.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased as I look around at the names to know that I know you and have relationships with many of you through social media, which I think is terrific. And I also want to say right at the outset, I don't have any answer particular. I don't know anything in particular. I am here because Betsy invited me, and I'm hoping that I have some perspectives that would be useful to you as you think about your students. But I don't know anything special. So I want to make that no one's that I'm here, I'm going to give you any answers, because that's definitely not the case. But one thing that Betsy have talked about in the past is the way in which so much of what happens through the arts happens through networks and through connections and through relationships, which is not new information, not a new idea, but that in this moment where we're not able to be physically together, the opportunity to make those connections and to lead your students to the people that you've had valuable relationships with over your professional career may become increasingly valuable, and a way that we can think about how to stretch out your impact or your influence on them past the end of the semester into their professional lives through those relationships. And I do think that there is this tricky balance of this moment, which that on the one hand, we are feeling overwhelmed and can feel kind of maxed out and can feel distracted, and it's hard to keep a focus on your work. But then on the other hand, I feel like true, authentic, meaningful connections in some respects mean even more in this moment, because we find ourselves so adrift and wanting to remember what's important and where the significance in our life comes from. And for me, definitely over the past few weeks, I've thought a lot about relationships. You know, familial relationships, friend relationships, and professional relationships, because I think for those of us who work in the arts, it's pretty hard to distinguish the significance of a professional relationship from one of a relationship. Betsy and I were also talking about this idea of collaboration. And one of the things that got me thinking about it is it's so scary to lose control the way we've all lost control in this situation, the way that the rug has been pulled out from under us. And I think that if there's any way to think about the advantages that we get from being as vulnerable as we are when things are this uncertain. And it made me start to think about what it means to collaborate with someone in a true collaboration where you relinquish your ego and your need to manage an outcome and give into a process. And I think that this moment that we're in is very much like that, where we can't say, I woke up today and these are the 10 things I'm going to accomplish, and I'm going to do these things before noon and these things before 5, and or even I know that I have a show that I'm working towards, or you know, I can count on this person being a partner to me in this thing. We're just in this very fluid moment. And so if there's a way to think about how letting go of some of that and being able to be in the moment and be lithe and present and let go of our need to manage an outcome, there can be great advantages to learning how to be in those spaces. And, you know, just personally, but then also in the way in which it can inform how we relate to professional partners as we move forward after this. And then finally, I want to say something about this idea of time. And Betsy alluded to it, and I don't know if you guys are going to talk about it more, but this notion that there are students who may have been far enough along in preparing their thesis show that they could take advantage of doing something online or doing something in a publication or pivoting and presenting their work in another way. There are going to be other students who weren't far enough along and who are not in a position that they can function well enough over the next 2 months to get their work to a place where it could go online or be published or exist in another way. And so allowing for that and appreciating that becoming a photographer, becoming an artist isn't about a thesis show. It's about something much bigger than that. And that this is a really unfortunate world calamity that has altered the course of what they were expecting, but that it is not, that was not the end. That was just a means to a larger end. So Betsy mentioned that I just published this book. So I began researching Ansel Adams in 2003. It was my doctoral dissertation in 2007. That was the same year that I started at the Center for Creative Photography. Over the last couple of years, I've taken that research, rewritten it for publication with Yale University Press. And on February 18th of this year, my book came out. And in the weeks, and I had a, 21 city book tour planned for this year. And in the weeks leading up to the release of the book, as I was listening to the news about coronavirus in China, I began to realize that there was a chance that I was going to lose this entire book tour that I'd planned to this thing that was out of my hands. And we had a first book event in Tucson on the 28th and 29th of February. And then obviously that was it. Everything since then has been canceled. And to work on something for 17 years and then to have this happen is upsetting, and it feels really not fair. But there's a limit to how much time you can spend in that zone of feeling like it's not fair before you have to let go of that. And, you know, at this point, I'm really feeling like my job now is to be patient and wait until we evolve through this and then think about how I pick it back up. But there's not much value in throwing myself on the floor and kicking and screaming and crying, because I'm not the only one who's had a loss here. Lots of people have. And so I don't know if there's something about thinking about that longer term arc and the way in which, your students have spent a lifetime getting themselves to the point where they are now and in the development of their lives and their practice. And that this is a big, messy interruption in the presentation of their work, but it's not the end. And how do we get through to the other side and think about how to help them share their work and make the connections they need to sustain a bigger arc. And then let me just finally say, I'd be happy to answer questions, and I might be more useful to you answering questions. So if any of you have any particular questions about my perspective as a curator or my perspective from the Center for Creative Photography, I'm happy to address those when we get to the Q&A part.
Thanks, Becky. Yeah, I'm not going to say too much more. I'm going to allow questions, and just and I'm going to hand it over to John, who's going to talk a little bit more practically about what's going on right now. But yeah, I also want this to be open to other things. We don't just have to talk about thesis shows, but I think that there's a lot of, thank you, Becky, that's just a lot of really good, rich things to think about. So John, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I've had some technical difficulties here, and I'm hearing music from downstairs. My daughters are blasting music in the kitchen, so here we are. Yeah, so we've been working over this last week. I mean, one of the takeaways from last week was is the overload, and we've been kind of going through the various forums like we talked about the other day. And there's also something I've just been noticing on the forums is that people are getting tired, and they're kind of picking fights on the forums, or I've seen at least 3 or 4 different fights about meaningless stuff. So it's kind of annoying. So if you're picking fights with people about particulars, don't, please. Anyways, so we have gone through, and I think we talked about, we had registered the domain name FotoFika, so we've now transitioned to that from a very long domain name. And I'm gonna share the screen just to go through briefly some of the things, and also just in reflection about the conversation about time. Is the BFA program at Iowa, or at VCU right now, we were going to be installing our show last week. So the position of our students is we're kind of directing all of their energy into a publication. And so writing their artist statements, dividing things up into separate pages for publication, with the thought of the exhibition happening when we can come back, or in June, or maybe the following year. So I'm going to think that the conversation about time is important, because we don't have to do everything now, right? Like the most important thing that we do is we support our students and get them involved and get them invested in finishing out the pieces that we can help them with. And then we can think, I mean, as this goes on, we started this with thinking that we were in a 2-week window, which is a 4-week window, which could last into the fall. So we have to really think about time in a much longer scale than I think we started 3 weeks ago when Becky held one of these. So I'm going to briefly just load up the website for a second. Let me know if you can see what I'm seeing here. It should say FotoFika. The Q&A, Anne, again, has gone through with a fine-tooth comb through all of the Q&A from last week. And now we've added it to just one page, and we're going to make it running. So it's in tutorials and resources. So the first one, which we've been talking about today, which I think Anne will talk a little bit about, is all the various things that we're finding online. And again, we're trying to make this as clean and selected as possible. But to my eye right now, it still looks a little lengthy. So we'll be returning to that. And next week, actually, there's someone who's on the chat right now, Tom Woodard, who's been working with me. He's the one who helped design the site that this is built on, and he is working to design a gallery space for our students to exhibit on, and is an open access person. So he would be willing to share all of that code for things happening in the system that he uses, which is, my brain is quiet now, so, or busy now. So, and then all of the things that we've done. So, and we're adding to this weekly as we go along. So as you ask questions, whatever we can't answer, we're going to add to this. We're also adding to the assignments. So there's 3 assignments that have been sent to us that are really fantastic that we're going to add. And again, in thinking about the way that this project has evolved, if it is a project, it's changing each week based on what we need. So we're going to keep adding assignments, but people already have their assignments. So, that's why the focus of today is thinking about exhibiting and thinking about kind of sharing our resources. And I just want to say one last thing too, that Betsy and Becky talked about was being generous with our resources, and I think about our intellectual capital and our connections to the outside world, in terms of with our students and introducing them and connecting them with the people that we're connected to, because we're at this moment where we really have to put everything into our BFA and MFA students so that they get the exposure that they deserve for the hard work that they've been doing. So I'm going to pass it to Anne, I think.
Can I make one comment about the assignments? One of the assignments that I was sent this week from Barbara Filian from Working Assumptions, which is an organization that tackles the idea of family and work and art practice, but they've specifically made assignments for high school students. And as many of us know, one of the ongoing complaints or critiques of SPE is that we're not often very inclusive of that. There's complicated reasons, but I just like to draw attention to that assignment for anyone who might be connected with high school and middle school teachers who are looking for something. Yeah, that's all. I just wanted to draw attention to that particular assignment. Okay, Anne.
And I will post that after this. So we've been trying to get everything posted in advance of this, but we also are doing a few other things, as we all are. All right.
So actually, while this screen is still up, John,
yes,
I just wanted to go. I posted this also on Facebook and have it here as well. And one of the things that I just wanted to reiterate was this idea of exposure. And so one of the things that we have thought about, you can go back to the thesis, so scroll up, is exposure, and thinking about that on several different levels. Thinking about that within your college and or university. What are different ways that we can address that? Instagram takeovers, if you already have an Instagram feed for your college program, because that's already has an audience built in. Online exhibitions, go to your IT people, go to your communications department, have them facilitate that process with you. Catalogs and books, and postponing certainly if that's an option. One of the things that Betsy and John and I have spent a lot of time talking about, and which Becky has so beautifully contributed to as well, is taking our connections and extending them to our students. And so now is a good time to begin asking the regional and local galleries, museums, and photo clubs that might be able to host the portfolios of your seniors, your grad students, as a way, again, to introduce them to a larger audience, introduce them to other individuals in the photo world that they might not have otherwise had the opportunity to have access to. And then lastly, thinking about whether or not there are national or international models, and we're beginning to just put some things down on paper, which may or may not come to fruition, but looking at SPE as an opportunity for both online exhibitions or maybe at our next annual conference. Interested in speaking to Ping Yao and other festivals that have large spaces where we might be able to do juried exhibitions. And then the Mandel trading card model, misspelled there, sorry about that, and thinking about how we might be able to have a very different kind of exposure for our students. And John, why don't you explain this, and then we'll pass it over to questions. And
yeah, we were just talking about the possibility of, I mean, I have a student right now who is making a whole deck of tarot cards. There's a bunch of different places that will manufacture playing cards at a very inexpensive rate. So we were thinking, like, wouldn't it be fantastic if we had a huge collection of playing cards of our BFA and our MFA students that we could make a huge load of and distribute, so our students and curators and followers or admirers could trade various trading cards with people's thesis work and various pieces of information on them. And that's something that we're talking about potentially building into either FotoFika or into SPE, or the resources that are at the FotoFika site. So if people are interested, let us know in the chat window, and we'll see and research whether or not it's possible. But I could imagine, I mean, my students would certainly want to be involved, both my grads and my BFA students. So if your students would like to be involved, let us know, and we'll research it further. And with that, let's stop sharing the screen. And we have been posting all of the workshops that we've been doing here. So anything we're recording, we're posting them here. We're trying to get answers to your questions. And there we are.
And I just, as we start the Q&A period, I want to point out that we don't just have to talk about thesis shows. I may have already said that. So we're still willing to talk about actual teaching and classroom things that are arising in the classroom. Just wanted to be clear with that.
And also, this is something that we're doing to try to be helpful and to be useful. So if you're finding these helpful and useful, let us know that. And because we're doing it so that it's useful to people. We don't want to do it just for ourselves, because there's no point to that, because it's, yeah.
I don't know. I like talking.
I'm kind of enjoying it.
It's pretty good.
I like talking to Ann and Betsy every week, but I don't have to if it's not helpful. It's only helpful if it's helpful, as they say.
So while we're transitioning over to answering questions, what we have found is useful is to have those questions in